There's a virus that literally reprograms your brain. It makes you aggressive. You become terrified of water. You want to bite everyone around you. And once the symptoms show up, 99.9% chance you're dead. This isn't sci-fi, this is rabies, and it's been hunting us since the dawn of civilization. Zombies, vampires, werewolves. You'd think these are just made-up monsters, right? But what if I told you that a real disease inspired all of these legends? Think about it. Foaming mouth, aggression, compulsion to bite, fear of light and water. In the Middle Ages, when someone caught this disease, people didn't understand what was happening. They thought demons possessed the victim, or some supernatural force transformed them. But the reality is even more brutal than the myths, because this is a virus. A tiny, invisible enemy that completely overwrites who you are. So, let's look at what exactly this monster is. The rabies virus, or its scientific name, rabies lyssavirus, is one of the simplest yet deadliest pathogens on the planet. Under a microscope, it's a tiny bullet-shaped particle with spike-like proteins sticking out from its surface. These spikes are the keys it uses to break into our nerve cells. The virus's genetic material is a single strand of RNA carrying just 5 genes. Humans have 20,000. But these 5 genes are enough to completely take over control of your brain. And here's the most terrifying part. This virus has been perfecting itself for millions of years. The ancestors of bats were already carrying it, long before humans ever appeared on Earth. So, when a rabid animal bites you, you're not fighting a modern epidemic. You're fighting an ancient, refined killer that's been evolving for millions of years, learning how to evade every defense your immune system has. But it doesn't just turn humans into zombies, animals too. And this is where the real horror begins. Dogs are the main carriers, but bats, foxes, raccoons, anything can catch it. And when an animal gets infected, it completely changes. A peaceful house dog suddenly becomes aggressive, wanders aimlessly, bites everything in its path. Why? Because the virus reprograms its brain. It gives it a compulsion to bite. This is the virus's strategy. It needs to spread, and the best way to do that is if the host gets angry and attacks others. Well, not just attacks, but bites into them. And now comes the most terrifying part. What happens if you catch it? Rabies is the deadliest infectious disease on Earth. 99.9% mortality rate. For comparison, Ebola is around 80%. The plague? Without treatment, 60 to 80. But rabies? Once symptoms appear, you're basically dead. In the entire world, only 29 to 34 people have survived after showing symptoms. 29 people. Out of billions infected throughout history, there is currently no cure once symptoms appear. This is the final end. How does a simple bite lead to the complete destruction of your brain? Well, the virus is brilliant. When a rabid animal bites you, the virus enters the wound, but it doesn't go into the bloodstream. No, it penetrates into the nerve cells. There it begins its journey. It literally hijacks the neuron's transport system, like a pirate commandeering a train. And it heads toward the brain. It crawls upward through the nerves at a speed of 8 to 20 millimeters per day. It's slow, but steady. And the best part, your immune system doesn't notice, because the virus hides inside nerve cells, where antibodies can't reach. So by the time it finally reaches your brain, it's too late. And once it arrives in the brain, the zombification begins. The disease has 3 stages. The first is incubation. This is the period when the virus silently travels through the nerve cells. And here's the twist. This can vary from days to even years. It depends on where the animal bit you. If on your arm, it might take months to reach your brain. If on your face, a few weeks. So you might even forget that something bit you. But the virus doesn't forget. And some cases, they're beyond terrifying. Imagine this. A man living in Brazil gets bitten by a dog. Nothing serious, he thinks. Life goes on. He gets married, has children, moves to a completely different country. 8 years pass, and then the symptoms appear. This actually happened. A documented case from 2010. Another case, a Vietnamese girl who moved to Australia. 6.5 years later, rabies killed her. And the longest suspected case, 25 years of the virus, just waiting, hiding in your nerves. The incubation period can range from 6 days to over 3 years in documented cases. So, you could be bitten today, forget about it completely, build an entire life, and then one day, years from now, you start feeling off. It's like a ticking time bomb you didn't even know was planted. The second stage is prodromal, flu-like symptoms, fever, headache, fatigue, and a peculiar sensation, burning pain at the bite site. This is the first sign that something is very wrong. The third stage is terminal, and this is where the horror begins, within a few days. Death. But in the terminal phase, you get one of two paths. Both are terrible. Rabies has two forms. The first is the furious form. This occurs in 80% of patients. Aggression, hallucinations, foaming mouth, compulsion to bite, and of course the most famous, hydrophobia. These people behave terrifyingly. They scream, move wildly, try to bite. This is the real zombie. They're physically unable to drink. When they try to swallow, the brain triggers such a spasm in the throat that they literally start to suffocate, and this causes panic. So when they see water or anything they should drink, terror grips them. And since they can't swallow, saliva flows. That's why their mouth foams. The virus perfectly designed this symptom. The more saliva, the easier it is to pass it to the next victim with a bite. The second form is paralytic. This occurs in 20% of patients. Here the muscles gradually become paralyzed. First around the bite site, then it spreads throughout the entire body. And you know what's fascinating? People noticed this transformation centuries ago. In medieval Europe, when someone got rabies, they didn't understand it was a virus. They saw a person foaming at the mouth, aggressive, trying to bite, afraid of water and light. They thought werewolf, vampire, demon possession. After 1650, reports of lycanthropy, people turning into werewolves, started to decline in Europe. Instead, doctors began calling it a disorder of the brain. Rabies was suggested as the origin of werewolf beliefs. The similarities were remarkable: transmission by bite, loss of self-control, animalistic behavior, and vampires. Same story. Juan Gomez Alonso pointed out the resonance between vampirism and rabies. The distorted sounds, exaggerated facial features, restlessness, wild aggressive behaviors, they made sufferers seem more monster than human. In the 1700s, when hydrophobia emerged as a documented condition, vampire panic swept Europe. People feared holy water not because of religion, but because rabid victims recoiled from all water. Folk remedies reflected this fear: kill the dog that bit you, apply its hair to the wound, cut off its tail. These rituals implied an invisible, supernatural tie between the animal and its human prey. But it wasn't supernatural. It was rabies, the monsters in our stories. They were real people, dying from a very real virus. And now the question: if we've known about this for thousands of years, why haven't we defeated it? Well, the answer is simple and bitter. The virus is incredibly stealthy. As I said, it hides inside nerve cells, where the immune system can't reach it. By the time it reaches the brain, the damage is already irreversible. The virus starts destroying brain tissue, causing inflammation. And when your body finally recognizes there's a problem and sends immune cells, it's too late. In fact, the inflammatory response only makes things worse because it damages the brain even more. The brain becomes so damaged that patients either fall into a deep coma or lose all brain function. And in both cases, whether furious or paralytic, within just a few days, death occurs. That's why there's no cure. Once the brain is destroyed, it doesn't regenerate. But there is one chance. Just one. Vaccination. And here's the surprise. Although it's almost hopeless after symptoms appear, rabies is 100% preventable with a vaccine. In fact, it even works after a bite if you get it in time. This is the only disease in the world where we have a chance to stop it after infection. If an animal bites you, go to a doctor immediately and get the post-exposure vaccine. It's a series of injections that stops the virus before it reaches your brain, and it works 100%. But here's the tragedy. Every year, approximately 59,000 people die from rabies worldwide. Let me break that down for you. In Asia alone, 35,000 deaths per year. India accounts for 60% of those deaths. That's 35% of all global rabies deaths. In Africa, 21,000 deaths annually. And here's the cruelest part. Africa spends the least on post-exposure treatment, but it has the highest cost of human mortality. Meanwhile, 10 million people receive post-exposure vaccines every year. In Asia, that costs up to $1.5 billion annually. So why are people still dying? Because 99% of human rabies cases come from dog bites. And in many parts of Africa and Asia, stray dogs roam freely. But healthcare is scarce. The vaccine exists. It's 100% effective. But if you live in a remote village, miles from the nearest clinic, with no money for treatment, you're helpless. This isn't a sci-fi horror. It's an ancient reality that's been documented for over 4,000 years. But the virus itself has existed for millions, the oldest zombie virus that humanity has ever faced. But the good news? There's a vaccine. And if you have access to it, you're safe. Because being a zombie, well, that's not as cool as it is in the movies. Thanks for watching. If you want more stories like this, subscribe and stay with me.